The Charlotte Podcast Festival is presented by Blumenthal Performing Arts, the Queen City Podcast Network, Eclecs Creative Agency, and WFAE, Charlotte's NPR news source, the home of acclaimed podcast Charlotte Talks, She Says, The List, Amplifier, Southbound, and FAQ City. Learn more about WFAE and our latest podcast, Work It, at WFAE.org.
All right. Welcome to the Charlotte Podcast Festival. And I am Sarah Pollock. I'm the production manager at Queen City Podcast Network, and I'll be your moderator for this hour and for the for this hour of the Charlotte Podcast Festival. Charlotte's first podcast festival presented by WFAE, Charlotte's NPR news source, Queen City Podcast Network, Blumenthal Performing Arts, Eclecs Creative Agency. This hour session is Changing the Game with Sports Podcasts. And this hour, we're going to develop a game plan for your sports podcast with Charlotte Podcasting Pros. So let's say hello to our panelists. We have Hugh Roberts, professional soccer player with the Charlotte Independents and host of the sports podcast, BackYardFooty. We have Ashley Mahoney, who is she works for the Post. She does a little bit of everything, but she is the co-host of Sports Charlotte. And we've got Colin Cole, who is a former NFL player of 13 years. He's now retired, and he's been podcasting and going to school and doing a little bit of everything.
A little bit of everything.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're going to have a great conversation about sports podcasting. We look forward to answering audience questions. So you can leave your questions in the Zoom chat box, and we'll try to get to them towards the end of the show. Reminder to the audience that the session will be recorded, and so it'll be made available over email. So make sure to check your emails, including your spam junk folders, because this hour's recording will get to you that way. We encourage you to check out the full list of sessions on the Charlotte Podcast Festival website, and forgive me, I'm reading my script. You can even support the festival by purchasing a brand new shirt, and this is the shirt, if you can see it. Ooh, I like it. And our website is the charlottepodcastfestival.com. With that said, let's get started. Okay, welcome everybody and to our panelists. Let me get to our questions. I guess if everybody kind of wants to, say hello, you guys could do that first.
All right. Hello. Thank you so much for having me, Sarah. Appreciate it. Colin, Hugh, great to share the stage with you guys, this virtual stage. And I'm the only non-professional athlete or person with professional playing experience on this panel. So it's not intimidating at all. But having reported on both of the teams that these fabulous hosts represent, formerly played for, appreciate you having me. Like Sarah said, I do a little bit of everything for the Charlotte Post, including co-hosting Sports Charlotte along with our editor-in-chief, Herb White, and we cover everything from the high school kids all the way up to the big kids. So everything in between, whether it's the college game, the professional game, the high school game, there's plenty of stories to tell out there. So thank you for having me.
What's up, everyone? My name's Hugh Roberts. I currently live down here in Charlotte as well. I'm currently also playing professional soccer for the Charlotte Independents, the local pro soccer team. If you haven't come to a game yet, we have playoffs this weekend, so definitely tune in if you haven't yet. Yeah, I started this podcast called BackYardFooty a couple of years ago, highlighting the backgrounds and experiences of us soccer professionals on and off the field, because a lot of us not only do things on the field, but a lot of us are also setting ourselves for our futures off the field. So it's highlighting that and showing you behind the scenes experiences, because really soccer doesn't get a lot of attention in this country and it's still growing. And so that's why I did these things to kind of highlight what we do and, shine a light on different things for you guys and just educate the masses, because all it is education really. And I want to keep shining a light on these things. So definitely subscribe on all platforms. I'm on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, every platform you can think of, and follow along. Nice to meet you guys. I'm looking forward to this festival.
And Colin.
Yes, and I'm Colin Cole. You guys hear me? You guys can hear me? Everybody hear me?
You're good.
All right, good. So yes, Colin Cole, like Hugh, well, actually, unlike Hugh, I'm a former athlete. Played with the Panthers. I also played in Green Bay, played in Seattle over my career. And yeah, just kind of as a former athlete, I decided to start with the podcasting, especially went to school, decided to start podcasting, particularly about former athletes and what that transition from being an athlete is like, and going from what you may have had in terms of who you were and what you were and what so many people, so many athletes attribute themselves to being, and what that is once you leave the sport, and what that life is like in quote unquote civilian life. So that's what my podcast transition from the trenches is about. And yeah, just kind of building that. So yeah, glad to be here, guys, and ready for the questions, ready to see how it goes.
Well, we're glad to have you. Okay, so I'm going to start with our first question. I guess, how did each of you get into specifically making a podcast about sports, like compared to other mediums, like, YouTube or, I don't know, there's a few different avenues you could have taken. What caused you to go the podcast route?
Yeah, for me, this is second division professional soccer here in this country, so not a lot of us are getting paid a good amount of money. So for me, I was looking for an outlet that's kind of the cheapest and easiest and quickest way for me to voice our experiences and our journeys. And podcasting for me was kind of, and this was, I feel like it's 2018, maybe before the trend started blowing up. And I figured I needed something the cheapest way, most efficient way, and something I can do by myself in my little apartment. So I started off just in my apartment, in my living room. I'd just invite players over from away games or different professional teams, and I would just do it in my living room on my couch because I knew that was the most efficient way. So that's kind of why I dove into the podcasting realm, because I knew from my standpoint, it was the cheapest and most financially stable within our budget, and I knew it'd be the most efficient way.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
Ashley?
Okay. This was more or less a mandate from on high, and I say that with tons of love toward our editor-in-chief. I call him Yoda. He is brilliant. He's been covering the region for longer than I've been alive. But in 2016, he expressed an interest in how do we continue to push the boundaries with the post. We'd already explored the video components of what legacy print media has to continue to evolve. So we had explored the video component, said, all right, we're going to start a podcast. And I'm looking at him thinking, you want people to hear my voice? I sound like one of the mice from Cinderella. No one wants to listen to that. I said, we're going to do it. We're going to start with a sports podcast. We're going to start with Sports Charlotte. That has been going on for the last 4 years. It's expanded into 3 other podcasts, The Creatives, The Stump, and In Other Words. But Sports Charlotte is our original, and we've had Hugh on several times, and we've joined him on his podcast, BackYardFooty, as well. And it's interesting to see the landscape continue to grow and evolve, and it is definitely different than it was in 2016. But it's everything from whether it's contemporary situations demand that we do more Zoom podcasting versus in person, because typically everything would be in person. We'd go out to independence training and then afterward talk with the coaches, talk with the players, things of that nature. So that is how we began the Sports Charlotte journey.
So I started doing podcasting when actually went to broadcast school 2 years ago, decided to go to Carolina School of Broadcast once I retired from the NFL. And one of the things we got a chance to learn was delve into the podcasting world. And so the main reason I decided to start the podcast that I did was because I being a retired athlete, there is a huge transition that all athletes go through once they decide to leave the world of sports. And so just to kind of hear some of the stories and some of the different transitions and different outlets that people kind of have had as at their disposal have been kind of, therapeutic for them, and what to kind of fill a gap that they've had, with their pursuit of their careers throughout their lives. So that's where my podcast kind of delves into and talks about what that life of that sport was like, and what it was like to be that athlete, and what it's like now, and what you do to kind of fill that time. So
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. You know, and Ashley touched on this a bit, and it was going to lead me right into my next question. You know, how has podcasting changed for you guys during this pandemic? You know, and I know as far as like, you know, the mediums that you have to use, but then also, you know, it's also changed sports a little bit. So how did that change your podcasts, actually?
I don't particular. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Hugh.
No, go ahead. Please have the floor. Please.
So this for us, it was always in person. We'd done phone interviews before, but the connection isn't quite as good. You may have someone who loses reception, or any number of things can go wrong. If you're in person, typically you can eliminate multiple variables. So that was our traditional way of going. We would have people come to our office. We would go on site. It was a very fluid process. Now, courtesy of 2020 and all of the fun that comes with it, it's basically nothing but Zoom. So Hugh's joined us multiple times via Zoom, and now what we would do is we would add the video component in addition to the audio with the podcast itself. But instead of strictly having one or the other, or just taking clips from the podcast and putting that into a YouTube video, we would do the entire thing. Takes a lot longer to edit all of that and make sure that it runs smoothly, but it's added multiple components. So there is the ease of access, and Zoom is pretty efficient. You don't have to worry about, you know, the call dropping like you do necessarily with a cell phone call or mobile call or things of that nature. But personally, it's not quite the same as being able to go and have that in-person conversation.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of changed over this quarantine and honestly this past year. So before, as I mentioned, I was living in Pittsburgh in 2018. What I used to do was every single time a team would come in to play us for a home game, I pretty much knew a guy or two on the other team. I would be like, hey, I'll pick you up from your hotel, come over to my apartment, we record this little episode, and I drop you back. So I did probably about 10 to 15 episodes that way in person. Then I moved here to Charlotte last year, and it was kind of the same thing. More, instead of one-on-ones, it transitioned now to groups, where I used to now I'm having 3 or 4 guys on my team, on different teams, and just highlighting, and had some coaches on there as well, highlighting different things in this area. So then when quarantine hit, I honestly didn't know about Zoom at all until probably like coaches were like, we're having a Zoom meeting, and I was like, Zoom? I've never heard of Zoom. So from there, I also had to adjust myself. Right before quarantine happened, I went to the MLS headquarters, interviewed Jorge Herrera and a couple of the MLS Charlotte staff guys as well. And that was the last time I did anything in person. So then from there, I did a coronavirus edition where I called 15 to 20 guys throughout my league across the whole country. And it was only like a 2-minute segment from each guy, but just highlighting what's going on in Sacramento, what's going on in Philadelphia, what's going on in New York. Just talking and giving you guys insight to what's going on in each little pocket and community that's being affected by this virus. So then, this movement happened, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and everything happened as well. I realized that I have a platform that I've been doing for a couple of years, and also there's not too many Black Americans playing soccer in this country. So it transitioned then from, doing I also had the president of the Independents on it. It went from doing one-on-one interviews with players to now I called 15 to 20 guys throughout my league and throughout the MLS, Black players, highlighting now our journeys and experiences being a Black kid growing up in this country playing soccer. And it was just a bunch of raw content. We actually had 2 episodes from that. And from there, actually shed a light onto our struggles. So just to give you a quick synopsis, after the second edition, FC Cincinnati donated. I had 2 guys from FC Cincinnati, the MLS team out there on my show. After they heard what their players were talking about on my show, they donated $250,000 to diversity programs and minority institutions in Cincinnati, just based off our conversations. So then I also realized, that was around June, end of June, I realized I got to keep going with this, and not necessarily, to talk about, our perspectives, but just kind of shine a light in this movement and our perspectives and what's going on from the Black perspective in the soccer world. So then that progressed to another episode. I also did a coaches edition where I highlighted Black coaches and their struggles throughout this country.
Uh-oh.
Is that my music? Sorry about that.
Oh, no, it could be anything. We've got several people in this.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So then it progressed on from Black players to now Black coaches. And then recently, my most recent episode, I had Charlotte Independence coaches, Charlotte Independence front office staff, Charlotte Independence pro players, and other local Charlotte influencers. We all came together, about 15 to 20 of us. And that's also just highlighting more of, what's going on from a professional organization standpoint with their statements, what's going on from pro players, what do pro coaches see. And it was just another hour and a half to 2 hours of raw content of us sharing different experiences that a lot of us didn't know. And it all just, as I said in the beginning, just educates all of us and helps us become more aware.
Man, honestly, for me, it really just, with everything that I had going on, I was having the opportunity to really go and do a lot of in-person conversations, and really, that was really huge, and got a lot of guys to open up and really talk about themselves and talk about a lot of what they were going through, and really how their transition was. But with obviously the addition of Zoom and the addition of everything else, for me, I really became more of a hermit and focused more on editing and focused more on just trying to get things edited and put together, and worked on different aspects of my podcast. So so I got a few things that will be coming out with another podcast that I do as well. So I have those things that are coming out in the works as well. So yeah, it just gave me a time to really refocus and re-energize and get some new content going.
That's great. I think that's really cool that, you used the slow sports moment to up your podcast game.
Yes. The other thing, if I get a chance, so I also got a chance to work with the Panthers over training camp over the summer. So gave me a chance to kind of hone in on some different things and talk to some guys about some updated stuff, as well as meet with some guys who are current guys who are coaches as well. So yeah, I think I will have some great things to come in the near future.
Looking forward to it. Okay, so I'm gonna switch gears a little bit and say, on the guest subject, like how do each of you go about choosing guests for your shows? Because I think that there's just like a different avenue. You guys are covering different aspects of sports. Who to start with?
That's a good question. For me, as I mentioned, it was mostly, I wanted to get different guys from different cities throughout the league. So I would, just look at our schedule and see if I had Nashville coming through. Okay, I already did my Nashville guys. I'm done with Nashville. Let me get Pittsburgh. Let me get different cities. I'm on the East Coast as well, so we need to play East Coast team. So let me try to knock out which guys I had on my team. And then it progressed last year to mostly Charlotte players. I just moved to a new city and a new team. So it's highlighting, some of the younger guys. We have guys from Manchester City in England, guys who are playing from Schalke in Germany, for Celtic in Ireland, had a bunch of good young players. So to highlight their perspectives. And then we had older guys on the team coming from the MLS. And for me, I'm mostly focused on the soccer realm and the soccer aspect. So it's more of, channeling which professional soccer players I wanted to get. And then it only increased from there as I got more, as I mentioned, as we changed episodes, Black players on it, more coaches on it, etc. But it's kind of based off, the vibe that I'm on and the educational realm that I'm on as well. It's kind of how I tailor my guests.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely varies by season, and I will be the first to admit there are times when Sports Charlotte will skew a little soccer heavy. We have a labor of love, as I like to call it, with Queen City Football Chronicle that the Post founded shortly after we started podcasting, but it is a soccer-specific platform that covers everything in the region. So everything from breaking news to featured highlights and so forth. That's just another layer of what we've done with this. But it can be something from a professional interview. It can be something like, okay, basketball season's coming up. There are a plethora of basketball programs, really good basketball programs at the collegiate level in the area. So you're talking Queens University with Coach Bart Lundy, Johnson C. Smith with the history with Coach Joyner, and his son coaches the women's program, Coach Joyner Jr., or is it the CIAA commissioner and Jackie McWilliams, and they're headquartered here in Charlotte. So are you focusing on the seasonal aspect, or is it, breaking news, for instance, yesterday with Charlotte FC signing their second player in Riley McCree, or the Independents. I'm going to bug you about coming on Sports Charlotte later this week to preview your playoff match against Charleston Battery on the 10th. So just to know that that text is coming. But it's so much like the nature of the business where things can change in an instant. And thankfully, we work with fabulous people who are like, yeah, that news just broke 10 minutes ago. We've got time later on today to jump on a podcast with you. Sure, no problem. And that's one of the benefits of Zoom, whereas before we would have said, okay, when can we meet? When can we do this in person? Now we can say, hey, let's set up a Zoom meeting, 20-minute conversation. Maybe it goes longer, 45-minute conversation. Boom, it's there. It's up on Spotify, SoundCloud, the works. And that's a blessing and a curse of 2020.
True. So for me, it's one of the good things about being in Charlotte is it's really a plethora of athletes, former athletes that are in the area. My podcast, I've had London Fletcher, former NFL, who will soon be a Hall of Famer. I've had Wesley Walls, NASCAR's Mike Wallace, Tamar Slay of NBA, as well as CBS Network, I think he is right now, is my man Roman Harper. So really, I just kind of luckily have had an opportunity to really meet a lot of people throughout the city. I mean, I know a lot of former athletes. Actually, it's a funny fact is Charlotte and the surrounding areas probably has the highest, not probably, I know for sure has the highest per capita of current and former NFL players. So it's not so hard to get guests to be on the show. It's just kind of depending on people's time and space. And so everybody's kind of got their schedule and things that they got to do. But for the most part, we're able to get people on, and it's pretty new. Again, the podcast is pretty new. The podcast world is pretty new, but I'm excited to see where it goes from here. And like my fellow panelists were talking about, the Zoom really makes it a lot easier. Jump on a lot of different conversations. That video aspect will be coming soon as well to the podcast. But yeah, I'm excited to see where things go. And the gift and curse, just like I was said by Ashley, it's of the Zoom and everything else that has been in the 2020.
That's really interesting. I guess if any of the audience hears that was interesting what you said about the amount of, I guess, NFL players that, it does seem like there's a lot of current and former athletes that do stay in Charlotte, and that seems like it might be really good for a podcast about sports. The next question I've got is, how do you think your personality sort of meshes with your show? Like it's, or complements it or changes the type of show you have?
Well, I think for my show, being a former athlete, I could really speak to having been in that life and understanding kind of the aspects that the guys have dealt with, men and women have dealt with in their respective sports, and understanding the topic specifically, understanding that, what it takes really, the fact that everybody, in their careers, not every career that is out there in the world, has to end in, when you're in your mid 30s or early 40s, what have you. So a lot of these athletes have to figure out what that is, what life after that is. And I'm really generous in saying 30s and 40s. Most professional sports careers mainly end, mid 20s, if that, so people who have dedicated their lives between their youth, their teens and early 20s and collegiate sports and collegiate athletics, people dedicate their lives, and at some point it has to end for them, whether they make it professionally or not. If you do get the opportunity to make it professionally, the statistics show that in the NFL, 2.5 to 3 years is the average career. So what do you do with the rest of your life? A lot of people who have dedicated their time struggle in moving past that. So, and that's just football. Every other sport has a different aspect. I have an opportunity to speak with NASCAR's Mike Wallace, understanding the aspects that are completely different in that, how they have to get their sponsorship dollars and how their careers are able to be elongated because of the fact that their season is a little bit different than ours. So there's different aspects to it, but every sport has that ultimate end. So being able to speak to that, kind of having had that experience myself, is where I have that experience and where you're trying to speak to them.
Exactly. And it seems like, I mean, I can speak from personal experience and wanting to stay involved in the game some way, somehow. And it seems like for us, Colin, Hugh, you have the benefit of still playing, and hopefully you will have many, many, many years to come in your career. But just that itch and wanting to stay involved some way, somehow. In my instance, it was playing collegiate soccer and just saying, all right, well, it's time to hang up the boots. Thank you, multiple concussions. But just finding some way to continue to stay involved in the game. And back to the question itself, I'm an introvert at heart. So this really forces me to come out of my bubble. And it's easy when you're talking about sports. It's always kind of been my, not mask, if you will, but my comfort space, my happy place. And it's just easier to have conversations about something that you're passionate about. And when you spend so much time dedicating your life to something, and then you're able to say, all right, well, my playing time is done, but there's still a way to be involved. It just makes it so much easier.
Yeah, and for me, I feel like I'm a pretty laid, chill back guy, and I wanted to share that same experience. So typically what happens after games, you know, we all hang out after a game. Sometimes you might go out, but sometimes you're really just chilling in your apartment, maybe even with the opponent's player. Sometimes if you know them, we're all just hanging out. So I wanted that same vibe for my shows, where I would tell my players before every show, and I still tell people now, put the cameras aside, put the microphones away. This is just me and you here having a conversation. This is just raw content. I tell my boys and my players, like, don't mind the cameras. It's me and you just sitting on a couch having the same conversation we would post-game, the same conversations if we were talking in the off season. And I wanted that same vibe because that's where you get the realest and most raw content from us when things are more natural and laid back. And I also didn't want it, yes, I might be hosting this podcast, but it really wasn't about me, and it still hasn't been about me. So I didn't want me to ever dominate a show or me to, you know, be the main figure in it. Every time I'm on my show, I make sure my guests are highlighted, make sure my guests have their time to speak. I chime in a little bit, might share my input, but it's mostly about them. And so I feel like that's also been beneficial just for me and my shows, and just based off the response I'm getting from people, because they're able to hear more and they're more engaged from my guests and whoever's on the show, just because I feel like my personality being laid back and just giving you an open floor and an open table to speak and have that raw content. So yeah, that's what I wanted it to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think you come across pretty chill and probably very easy to talk to for your guests. Okay, so have any of you guys, can you like think of an example of like a time whenever you sort of like, whether it was a technical or like kind of like a rookie mistake, just something that you ended up learning from and are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened, as far as like podcasting goes with guests or whatever, you know?
I wouldn't say it was a rookie mistake, but it was a heartbreaking moment. We were at UNC Charlotte interviewing 2 football players for the Charlotte 49ers, and it was a fantastic episode. It was after their weekly press conference on a Tuesday, and it was great. It was wonderful. It was 2 kids who played here locally in high school. And then there was a computer issue, and it ate the podcast. And we just kind of sat there like, that didn't happen. That just happened. Okay, the podcast is completely gone. So it was about a 45-minute conversation. It was amazing. I still to this day will argue that was the best podcast we'd ever done. But now we'll never know because we'll never get to hear it. So thankfully, you know, we shortened it to about a 15, 20-minute conversation. We're still able to produce the podcast. But yes, that I'd have to say was one of the most heartbreaking moments thus far. Knock on wood. Hopefully that doesn't happen again soon.
Yes.
Yeah, for me, well, one on the technical side, I got some very cheap microphones from Amazon. I was trying to make a cool display, had the mics hanging over close to your face, everything looking good. But those are some of the worst microphones I've ever had. And I was recording on QuickTime. Now I use GarageBand, but I was just recording on QuickTime, not really knowing what I was doing. And the audio and the sound was terrible. And from then on, I had to immediately go buy some new microphones. It was a whole experience. From the video aspect, before I didn't know how to put videos on YouTube. I thought I could only do a 15-minute clip unless you're like I think it's like a verified person or something. But then my friend told me how to upload everything. So I'm in the off season working hard on my first edit video. It's like an off season work. Probably took about 6 hours to edit this video. Did everything, thought I saved it. I actually didn't have enough file room on my computer. Long story short, I ended up erasing the whole thing and deleting my whole project. And I woke up that morning furious. I spent the next 9 hours not eating, not leaving my bed or nothing, just editing my video to make up for time. I was so distraught. But I learned from Final Cut, right? I got real good with Final Cut right there in that moment, though. So it kind of taught me now to be more diligent with my things. But yeah, those who edit videos, you know how it can be.
So I have an instance when a guy who's in the area, lives in the area I played against during a career, and I went to school in the area, Carolina School of Broadcasting. So when you share spaces with different people, you have to make sure, and just like you talk about rookie mistake, that kind of what my issue was, a bit of a rookie mistake. So I had a guy come through and did an interview, and about 35 minutes, I think it was a great interview. And, we said our dues. He went about his way, and I went back into the room, and one of my classmates was in the room, kind of on the computer I was just on, and my work wasn't saved. And that was yeah. And so I haven't been able to reschedule that, but kind of the instance of working in spaces, you got to make sure that you check, make sure things are done, and you double check, and in some instances you have to you have some stern talking tools after things like that happen. But, it's a learning experience. It's just like everything else.
And to answer, sorry, real quick, Mike Ray, to answer your question too, I use the Blue Yetis every single time now. And so, yeah, definitely recommend the Blue Yetis. They're top-notch quality. You have 3 different settings, and it does a good job. So, yeah, I use that.
Cool. I think that was a good, quick, concise answer, but we will get to the audience questions shortly. I have a couple more questions for you guys. So I guess, what podcasts or podcasters, sports podcasts or other, I guess, are you inspired by, or even inspired your podcast?
I'd say definitely Full Time with Meg Lanham. It's a newer podcast by The Athletic, but her coverage of women's soccer is absolutely phenomenal. And it's always a combination of, when I'm on the Greenway, I will be listening to one of 2 podcasts. It's going to be her, or it's definitely going to be Backyard Footy with you. So it's always one of those 2.
Yeah, for me, it was kind of difficult for me, to be honest with you. There's some soccer analysts talking about soccer world, but not necessarily players giving their perspective. So for me, I listen to JJ Redick's podcast on the basketball side and CJ McCollum's podcast on the basketball side. Listen to those 2. Those are great for me to get me started. I wanted to know how they ask questions from the player's perspective. Do I speak more? Do I speak less, kind of thing? So that helped me to start. But honestly, like I said, there's really not too much in the soccer world. So I really just started listening to like NPR radios, The Next Big Idea, and more like The Hidden Brain from NPR too, more just intuitive entrepreneurship podcasts, kind of to help me steer my brain and get me going. So from the sports side, really only just CJ and JJ Redick's podcast, but they're very good.
I would say I listen to most talk radio. Again, it's being the subject matter is kind of different. So like I said, talk radio, I listen to quite a bit of maybe Joe Rogan's podcast, but for the most part, just kind of talk radio, and a lot of storytelling. I listen to maybe more audio books, so more so than podcasts. So
Nice. Well, there are some really good questions coming in from the audience. So I'm going to go ahead and start pulling some questions from there. And so I'm going to start with this question from Andrew. Andrew is a high school teacher who's looking to record episodes with some of their famous athlete alumni. So what is the best way to get in touch with famous athletes and notable celebrities to book them for the podcast?
I would say from honestly, is to kind of reach out to them directly. Social media has been a blessing in terms of being able to get in contact with people, being able to reach out to them directly. And most people are approachable. So just do that, find them on social media, find a way to reach out to them in that regards, or find them online and see if they have some sort of foundation, or see if they have some sort of nonprofit that they support or that they have in themselves. So those are probably the fastest, the easiest ways to be able to find people. And, more times than not, people are accessible.
Colin, I have to ask, did you prefer as a player for people to reach out to you directly, or to go through the team and their communications office? Because I know some teams, as a pro, because I know for some teams they're like, you have to go through our communications people, and then there are other players who are like, I'm fine with it. Might piss off the communication side a little bit, but for them, it's fine. It's no problem. Send a message on Instagram or something like that, and they're open to it.
As a former player, I'd say it's a lot easier to reach out to guys who are former players. As a current player, I would say it'd probably be easier to reach out to that player as an individual. But if you work for a network, or if you work for, say, a radio company of some sort, it's probably better to reach out to that media department directly, because you get a lot of messages from a lot of different people, and it's hard to screen everybody. So athletes are kind of leery about responding to just about anybody, because you don't know what that's going to lead to. And that's what they're really telling the athletes to do, is not to reach out to these people, not have direct contact with them because of that fact, because there are a lot of creepers out there. I mean, I'm sure we all know that. So it's best to know that the best way to contact a current athlete is probably reach out to that media department and try to find a way to get to the athlete that way. But yeah, don't hesitate. I mean, reach out to them on social media, and if they do, reach out to you, then kind of use that. But if not, then that's probably the best formal way of doing it.
Yeah, I would definitely have to agree with that. I would say it's a little mixture of both. From the media side, I would say broadcasting or a radio company or some kind of media will definitely go through the team. But I mean, for me, in my perspective, and I also don't mind personally just shooting me a DM. I've been on a bunch of shows myself. People just reach out to me and shoot me a DM, or actually sometimes other media here in Charlotte might go through the team. But I've even shot my shot myself through other guys, and just reach out through a DM, and you'll be surprised. Some of them are more than willing to help you out just through a DM. Now, if it's formal, whatever, exactly what Colin was saying, definitely it might be easier to reach through the professional club themselves. But if you're doing something a little lesser on the scale, then, feel free to reach out sometimes. Shoot a DM.
Exactly. I feel like if you Hugh, you and I have that working relationship over your last 2 seasons with the club, and it's one thing for me to text you like, "Hey, do you have time to come on the podcast?" versus, a rookie, for instance, someone who's brand new to the game, and they may never have given an interview, period, let alone having come on a podcast or been in front of a camera or something of that nature. So I think it just depends on what you're comfortable with and what you think that your guest would be comfortable with. And if this is someone who's retired, then like Colin said, it's a whole other ball game, because you're not dealing with a front office anymore. There isn't necessarily a set communications buffer in terms of people who it is their job to organize these things for the players, for coaches, and so forth.
Absolutely. So, sorry, I'm trying to read the chat and get questions, and I'm coming back and forth. So, I guess the next question I've got is from Katie, and it's basically about how to stand out when there's so many podcasts out there. How do y'all do it?
I mean, it's kind of cliche, but you definitely have to be unique in your own world and be happy and content with that. And a lot of times we dive into other people's pots and kind of get ideas from them, which is great too. Definitely get ideas from other people, but you have to diversify yourself and, show why yours is unique in comparison to everyone else within your realm. That could be, bringing in, I'm not sure what realm you're in, but whatever it is, it's kind of finding that niche within yourself and making it different. And I know you've heard that before, and I would love to find out what your realm is so I can help you make that more specific. But for me, in my realm, I knew, one, there wasn't really players' perspectives, and there are some other players doing podcasts as well. But I feel like because I'm more of a a comfortable, laid-back vibe where we're also just sharing raw content and sharing our journeys and experiences. And I also, I met some videographers out here. I've also been able to share locker room footage, practice footage, during the game footage too. That kind of separated myself from other soccer podcasters within my league as well. So just kind of definitely study your opponents. It's good to just study up and see what they're doing and taking notes from them, and then seeing how you can be different and what they're not doing and what they're lacking and what you can be better at.
Good answer.
I certainly think the two of you have a very unique perspective of having walked in that life, and you can speak to it in a way that members of the media like myself, we can't speak to that unless we have that professional playing experience. So I'll never be able to say this is what it's like to suit up on a Sunday and play for the Panthers against the Seahawks. I'll never be able to say, all right, this is what it's like to suit up for that playoff match of the Independents versus the Battery in the first home playoff match ever. Those are things that your perspective in and of itself kind of gives you a unique voice that isn't present elsewhere in Charlotte, versus what Herb and I get to do with Sports Charlotte is, all right, how do we differentiate ourselves from the rest of the media landscape here? And we are hyper local, and we have to be, because that's what makes us different. That's what makes us say, all right, you're not just going to hear us talk about, the Panthers and the Hornets and the major league sports here, but we're going to give you the look at the minor league soccer landscape. We're going to give you a look at, the CIAA, at Conference USA, at all of these fantastic collegiate programs here. And it has to be so hyper local that you say, well, I'm not going to get this anywhere else. This is the only place I can listen to it.
Good point.
And for former athletes, I mean, it's across every realm. I mean, just having an opportunity to speak to everybody across every aspect, whether it be, I haven't had Hugh, obviously I haven't had any Major League Soccer athletes on my sports show yet, so I'll get to that point. So, but other than that, I've had the opportunity to get across each sports realm, and so that's kind of the uniqueness of that in and of itself, is just kind of getting to the point of being able to talk to people and kind of seeing the similarities that everybody kind of deals with, but being able to really speak to how that transitions and how that life, how everybody kind of goes through that, and whether you go into a mentorship role or what role you go into after that. Those are things that people kind of figure out, and that's the kind of uniqueness of that. Other than that, just really lending myself to other sports shows. I do some sports radio with sports podcasts with Charles Arbuckle, does a couple of shows in the area as well. So, and as well as some other shows. So it's kind of just keeping the content fresh, but within my own lane, I make sure that I try to bridge out and make sure that I'm across every aspect and every avenue, so that everybody has an opportunity to kind of speak to their own aspect and their own world and what their lives have been.
Nice. Yeah. These are great questions. Thanks, everybody. I'm still going with a few of them, but I just wanted to make sure everybody knows that I've been learning a lot too. I guess this one is from Sammy, and it says, how do each of you guys, go about promoting your podcast to gain awareness and build another occasion for listening? I guess, how are you engaging the audience and getting them to come back each time? Or how did you start doing that? You probably have a pretty big following by now.
So I'm gonna be honest, I'm lazy. I haven't done nearly enough promoting. I'll be honest with you, before these two, because I'm pretty sure that these two have probably done a million. I'm really taking notes on what they're doing to promote theirs. Social media mainly, and updates every once in a while, some email shouts, but I gotta step my game up.
So the beauty of being legacy media, we have an in-house ad, if you will, that runs in our print publication every Thursday. So you'll see the logo for Sports Charlotte. It's a football with the word Sports Charlotte, and there's QR codes. So if you're reading the physical print publication, you just scan that with your phone and it'll take you to the podcast. Or we'll have references to the podcast within our stories on the website as well as in print. And then we also have a sports letter that comes out every Wednesday, as well as our QCFC newsletter that comes out every Tuesday. It actually came out this morning. So our most recent guest on Sports Charlotte was Charlotte 49ers men's soccer coach Kevin Langen. And that in and of itself, I think there's a way, because we have to cover so much in so many different realms, it builds a broader audience in terms of, all right, it's not just college football, or it's not just high school soccer, it's not just one thing. There's so many different things. There's a little bit of something for everyone. So having the legacy media aspect definitely helps, the social media side, and of course the newsletter side also helps.
Yeah, for me, I might be one of the younger ones in this whole festival itself, so I kind of had to use my intuition in social media on my side. So first off, you got to get on every platform for sure. YouTube, Apple Podcasts, every platform you can think of, honestly. Secondly, some little things I learned and tips I learned, especially on Instagram. Instagram, you can go to the explore section and just type in a hashtag like podcast, podcasters, Charlotte podcasters, something pops up, thousands of posts of local podcasters, people podcasting in general. Then you just like some as well, like for like, people are going to like you like back, even if it's a startup podcast with only less than 100 followers. You want that, honestly. So when they see your like, they're going to like yours back, and then they're going to follow you and you follow them back. Start commenting on people's sections. So when they see your comments, they go to your page and they come back to yours and they might comment as well. And it's just a little back and forth kind of thing. Then you have to have content. I'm sure you guys listen to Gary Vee a little bit, and he always talks about content, but it's not really bombarding people with content every day. But it's having something at least weekly. If you're on Instagram, having something on your story, at least one thing almost every day, especially if you're starting out. So when people come to your page, you're consistent with it. They're constantly knowing, like, okay, I go to BackYardFooty, I know he has a post up, or I go to BackYardFooty IG, I know he has a story up. So people, and Instagram also shares your stories more, and if you're liking things more, they'll put you on the forefront in comparison to other stories and other posts too. So just being active and liking other people, checking the hashtag and just searching hashtags. I'm telling you, those little ways like that, you'll start seeing your followers go up, and people start paying attention to your profile by liking your pages as well. And then some people might shoot you a DM and all those kind of things. But definitely just being consistent with your content and definitely giving people something to look forward to.
Yeah, that sounds great. I've got a question from Mike. Share a bit, like, each of you guys about your recording or editing setup, like what programs you guys rely on and or equipment.
Right
Yeah.
now it's definitely Zoom, but everything goes from I'm more or less, because we have to be socially distanced or physically distanced during this time. Typically Herb and I would host together. We've been doing more individual hosting throughout the pandemic, and it's mostly just I will record an episode with, for instance, with Hugh, and then take that video, send it off to him, and he works the magic of putting everything onto Spotify and Queen City Podcast Network and so forth.
Yeah, for me, as I mentioned earlier, I use the blue microphones. That's what I did in person. Now I just do strictly Zoom, but in person I use the blue microphones. Those were top quality for me. They're cheap at Best Buy. I got two of those, for one in front of my face, one for the other people. But even if you're in a group, there's a setting in the back, and it catches everyone's voice in a little circle. So the snowballs are great for me. And then recording wise for a camera, I just use a basic Sony camera from Best Buy as well. I need to upgrade my camera, definitely get some HD quality next time we're in person. But I really just started out with the snowball microphones and the basic Panasonic camera.
I actually started out buying a Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 Studio 3rd generation setup. So I got the interface, I got the whole microphone and the whole USB audio setup. So that's what I use. And whenever I record, it gives me really good sound quality. And so I just plug it directly into my phone, and I just call my guests, and I'm able to have that. Other than that, when I was recording in the studio, obviously I just had the files and I could just edit that way. But with this setup, I can just call, and the sound quality is pretty good as far as doing phone interviews. So
Nice. Ashley?
Oh, it's I was the first to.
You did? Okay, sorry.
You're fine.
I didn't know. Let's see. Peggy actually wanted to know about those of you that do any kind of like YouTube videos. How do you get around the 15-minute limit? I'm not
Yeah.
familiar
So
with
that's,
that.
Peggy, that's a great question. That's what I was saying earlier. When I first started out, I thought you had to be a verified YouTube user to only upload, longer than 15 minutes. But honestly, so if you follow me, you just go straight to youtube.com. And then if you already have a profile made up, you go on the top right, you'll see a little box in the corner, and it has a little camera with a plus sign. Hit that camera and a plus, and then just hit upload video, and you can upload however long videos you want. My most recent video is almost 2 hours. So yeah, just upload it straight, and then everything goes straight to file. Don't do it from profile, upload that way, because it only allows 15 minutes. Just go straight to your home screen, go to the top right, hit the camera that has a plus sign in it, and then upload video, and then boom, you'll be able to upload everything.
Nice. What's that? She kind of had a little second part to her question. She was saying like athletes that block DMs, like do you just move on to someone else, or is there any other way to get in touch with those athletes?
If they're an active professional athlete, definitely try and go through the team's front office. You're looking for their communications department. They're the people who can help you set up those interviews. And again, like Colin and Hugh both said, these are people who are trained to try to avoid all the creepers out there, because there are plenty of them. So that's why there's the safeguard in place of the communications department. So it's not a hard stop sign. It just means you got to work a little harder to get that interview.
Mm-hmm.
I know some people also. No, go ahead, Colin. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I was going to say Ashley probably hit the hammer on the head right there. I don't think there's anything else to be said. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I know some people have also, if you can't reach him, they've reached out to other teammates and have gone around him to reach that one person, if that makes sense. So some people have reached out to me to reach out to other guests that I've interviewed because their DMs aren't open or something like that. Sometimes if you know someone else within their team or in their little bubble, that might help as well to reach out.
Also, try to give them as much context about why you're reaching out to them to avoid any sort of a creeper vibe. Because if you see someone who's just randomly reaching out to you on social media, it can be a little, okay, what do you want? Versus, hey, I'm a podcast host. We'd love to have you on to discuss X, Y, and Z. Here's our availability. Here's an example of a previous podcast, examples of previous work, just to kind of put their mind at ease and really help sell what you want to tell in terms of that story. Will really help it go a long way versus, hey, are you free this week? Don't ever do that. That would not
Excellent point. Excellent point. I hate to interrupt everybody because we actually ran out of time. We had really, really good audience questions, so they went over a little bit. So I just want to thank everybody who submitted questions, and let's give a big round of applause to our speakers. We've got Ashley Mahoney, we've got Colin Cole, and we have Hugh Roberts. And thank you very much to everybody. I don't know how we do a round of applause on Zoom, but we'll imagine everybody's doing that. A reminder to the audience, the session has been recorded and will be made available as an archived session. So keep an eye on your emails, including your spam junk folders for that video. We will get that out as soon as it is ready. We still have a month of free podcast sessions and panels taking place as part of the Charlotte Podcast Festival. So check out the full list of sessions and speakers. Let's see, hold on. Go to charlottepodcastfestival.com and register your seat today. You can share about your experience by using the hashtag CLT Podcast Fest. social media, like any social media. And you can also pick up a locally printed t-shirt at charlottepodcastfestival.com. Make sure to join us for the podcast happy hour this Friday at 6 p.m. You can register for it once again at charlottepodcastfestival.com. And thank you again for attending today's session. I'm Sarah Pollack. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and rest of your week. Keep on podcasting. Bye, everyone.